Okay, so I am going to welcome in Josh Duntz, who is the founder of the very, very widely known Stasis Breathing Program now, which I know many, many, many people with long COVID, plus obviously other people prior to this pandemic have been using the program. These people are being helped by it. And Josh, you've very kindly given us some time to come in and explain how this program came about, and why it is that it's so impactful for this kind of condition. So Josh, just first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and kind of make it all link for us, because, you didn't start out being a breath expert, did you?
No, definitely not. Actually, probably quite the opposite. I was pretty skeptical about all of it when I first heard about, or when I was first introduced to the concepts of breath work myself. So yeah, I spent 10 years in the Navy Special Operations community before I started Stasis. I did that from 2010 until December of 2019, which is when I left the military. And that's around October of 2019 is when Stasis was technically formed as a company. And so that's kind of, a couple years before that is when I really started diving into not just breath work, but cold exposure. And I would say just general, more human performance stuff. It was a big part of the community and the job that I did in the military. And I knew that when I kind of made the decision that I was going to not stay in the military for the rest of my career, it's kind of what I wanted to do when I got out. And that's how kind of I got into breath work in the first place. The origin story was actually another colleague of mine in the military was training to go do this really hard military training pipeline. And I was kind of just his training partner. And he was the one that actually introduced me to he was doing a lot of warm up breathing techniques and then stuff after our workouts to help him kind of jumpstart the recovery process. But it was very formalized. And he was the one that kind of showed me that. And I was like, I don't know. I was in probably the best athletic shape of my life at that point. And I was like, I think I'm breathing fine,
Yeah.
But he was someone that was in better shape than I was, someone I really respected. And so I was like, well, if he's doing it, there's got to be something to it. Let me at least kind of give it a shot.
Right.
And, over the first couple of weeks, as I started training with him and he started kind of helping me implement it into my training, I noticed a huge difference right away. Really, with me just being able to be more aware of my body and my breathing patterns, while I was in training sessions, I felt like I was able to control my heart rate, and that really allowed me to control how much exertion I was doing when I was training. And that just made the world of difference. Whereas before I would kind of go into workouts and the workout would dictate how I was breathing. And now I had control of that and was actually able to do the same amount of intensity and effort, but at a much lower heart rate, which is always, what most athletes are trying to do, because you can always push the limits and the duration of those training sessions if you're able to keep your heart rate lower. And so I left the military, and then it's kind of weird how I got introduced to the COVID community, I guess, was before the pandemic even started. I was looking for some scientific advisors to help us and to join Stasis and what we were trying to do. And I sent a cold email to Dr. David Petrino from Mount Sinai. Right. I happened to just Google search something and his lab came up, and I, was kind of peeking around his website, and I was like, oh, this guy's perfect for what, I want him on my team. He seems super open to all this stuff. He had a human performance background. So he had done a lot of work with professional sports teams and Red Bull athletes here in the States. Mm-hmm. So I was like, he's kind of the perfect guy for what we were looking to do. And somehow I found his email address. I shot him a kind of a cold email, and to my surprise, he responded back to me. was kind of super interested in what we were trying to do. And we hopped on a call like a week later and kind of just hit it off. And so I had developed that relationship with him like earlier in 2020, kind of, I guess, right when the pandemic was really started. And then, fast forward a few months, his role at the hospital had really changed into really standing up their post-COVID care center and, starting to think about, okay, how are we going to develop rehab programs for these patients? And then our mindset kind of shifted at Stasis too, because when I started the company, we were really intentionally looking to like work with like military operators and athletes, because that's the background that we came from. And then we kind of saw that this was a respiratory disease. A lot of people were having breathing programs. And I saw like a lot of the symptoms that were being reported were the same things that we were looking to kind of teach athletes and military operators. So had a bunch of conversations with David and his team from Mount Sinai, some of their physical therapists and stuff, and just like told them my kind of hypothesis. I was like, hey, I think what we're doing with some small tweaks and stuff can help these people. They believed what I was telling them. And so we set up a small little pilot test with some early COVID patients from Mount Sinai, and kind of the rest is history from there.
Right. So when was that test? I'm just really curious, at what point you started bringing that into life?
I think the pilot test kicked off in June of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be I'm trying to remember at what point I became aware of it, but I think it was really quick, because I think we'd heard about the work of David at Mount Sinai. And then there was an article in a paper called The Atlantic, which really helped people identify, oh, I might not have shortness of breath or have my breathing dysregulated by COVID, but a lot of the autonomic nervous system issues are going to be sort of tended by doing some very particular breathing exercises. And it was really brilliant timing, because Stasis was suddenly on the scene. And then this article came out, which people could read a bit more about, because of course, you need to kind of marry up. So this program exists and people are beginning to talk about it, but why? Why should we do it?
Yeah.
So I set up my Facebook group in around June the 14th of 2020. And I'm a yoga teacher and an NLP coach. And so, for me, it was all about, there's got to be things that we can do to help ourselves, because I'd also got long COVID. And these two just came in exactly the right point. There's something that we can do, and here's something that we can read about why. Because we just needed as much information to convince people to get into that as a route out. Because, so many people were going, I've never been this ill. Don't even try and tell me that changing how I breathe is going to be the route. I'm not interested in that I want drugs. Give me drugs. I'm really ill. So how did it start to kind of unfold? Because you must have noticed the kind of the signups just being phenomenally fast at times.
I mean, when I think that article came out in May of 2021. So at that point we had been in for about a year at that point. But yeah, I mean, when that came out, that just
this was definitely last year. So there must have been a pre-thing written, because I can send you the link, because it was a phenomenally timed piece of writing, maybe just looking at breathing and the autonomic nervous system. But anyway, they married up for me. So at what point did you start to see big numbers signing up?
Yeah, it was after that article was published in the Atlantic. No, so I must have been mistaken. Yeah, whenever that article released, it was about a year ago now.
Right.
That's when things kind of really took off. And then after that came out, we also had like a bunch of other publications from like reporters that saw that article and wanted to do similar things. So like every kind of big news dump that we would have, we would obviously see like some numbers spike. But it's been pretty steady like since then. I don't know exactly. On a typical day, we probably have like 25 people sign up every day. So it's been like that for the past, year or so. But yeah, it was really cool. And that was something, when we first started doing this, I knew how important it was to to give people the science and let them try to hopefully understand, like, how is something as simple as changing your breathing actually going to affect like this? Because again, I was skeptical of this in the first place until I started reading all the academic research and kind of clinical studies that had been done over the past decade that no one was talking about at the time. And so like for the first year, I did these hour-long onboarding sessions where we would have 50, 60, sometimes 100 people in them. And I would kind of give my spiel to everyone and tell them how we started, what's the science of it, and kind of give them all the introductions to it. And I was doing that every day, you know, for almost a year. And it became too much where I was unable to handle it anymore. So we finally figured out, let's just automate this process, and kind of that's what we've done now. But I thought it was really important. And I really enjoyed like having that live interaction with everyone, because they got to, you know, ask me questions at the end. And it was also a really good learning experience for me to learn what was working, that we were doing, what wasn't working, where was I maybe not explaining things best that people were still fuzzy around. So I definitely wouldn't like take that back. It was a lot, and it was like, you know, a lot of me talking for like 8 hours a day, but I learned so much. I think it was pretty pivotal for what we were trying to do at the time.
Well, I think, you know, the amount of people that have fed back, you know, so I know a lot of people that were there in the live onboarding sessions, because I can remember I didn't do the process myself. But I did ask a lot of people, so what happens in the live onboarding? You know, tell me about it. And how did it work with your brain fog and your cognitive impairment? Because, you know, some people are so ill, and they just said, actually, it was really great because he was just really easy to listen to. And he explained it in a way that made it really easy to digest. And so there weren't many questions. It was just, okay, we're going to trust this guy. We've got nothing else to work with. We might as well go for it. So, you know, that it must have been, you know, whatever you were doing in that moment, you allowed the snowball to really begin to pick up momentum, because people got on board with the idea at a time when there was nothing else for people to really have as a hopeful kind of tool to use, you know, especially the people that were getting clear tests, you know, negative test results. Oh, there's nothing else that we can do, madam, sir, you know, you're on your own kind of thing. And you're left in this limbo, this kind of wasteland of, I've never been this ill, but they've told me that they can't find anything. And so now I don't know how to help myself. So that, you know, for me, it was one of the first things. It's been pinned to the top of my Facebook group for 18 months. Do the Stasis Breathing Program. I don't care if you think your breathing is fine. Just do the program. It's free. And let me just check, is it still free? It's still free to access?
Yep, all the programs are still
amazing.
Free. Yeah.
I was like, it's come out of America, which has a privatized health system going on there, and it's free. Quick, do the program before they change their minds. So that, you know, a huge congratulations on making that accessible to everyone and anyone at a time when people desperately needed something to hang on to. So, okay, so I'm going to have a little look at my list of questions now that we've sort of introduced it. Sure. Because I asked the Facebook group, what would you like to know? So here's the thing. Did you work with Mount Sinai to look at the progress people were having? Were they actually using it to kind of check people's forward momentum in the program, or like how have they managed to capture data of recovery?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly how they have the process set up now. In the beginning, when we first started, they were having so many of the long COVID patients that they were working with were waiting 3 or 4 months to kind of go through the medical process to get all the tests and stuff done. So what we had set up is like, instead of just like having those people wait 3 or 4 months and not do anything, send them to us. We'll get them started on the breathing program. And that way, by the time they're kind of cleared through all the tests, they can start physical therapy and be at a better place.
Right.
And they had this app, I can't remember what it was, but they were doing basically data collection through the app with those patients. So they could just kind of like on a daily basis check in. And they published those results in in the first like clinical study that they did, where the main outcome that they were looking to see was a lower in chronic fatigue. And I
Yeah.
believe on average it was like 30%, that each patient lowered their chronic fatigue by 30% in the first 60 days of that program. And so that was super cool to see that, for sure.
Yeah. 30% when you're really struggling with fatigue is a very significant and important number. So amazing. What other things do you think, let's just make it nice and clear for those people that might not even have heard of it. What other things do you think that looking at your breath and retraining your breath can help with this kind of chronic condition?
Yeah. So we see the people that when people sign up on our website, all new members, we send them like a baseline survey to fill out. They don't obviously have to fill it out if they want to, but then we'll send them like follow-up surveys so we can just see how they're progressing. And some of the most common things we see are, lower numbers in stress, anxiety, and fatigue, and then increase in sleep quality, stress response, which is basically like, how are you able to deal with daily stressors that come into your life? And then increase in focus and just overall wellness. So those are the big things outside of just the general like respiratory health, where we would see, and we capture that through a couple like breath tests that we'll have people do on a week by week basis. And so we tend to see pretty good improvements in those in like the first 4 weeks from most people. Obviously, but something like this, it depends on like the severity of the symptoms or someone's experiencing, or even like, how their age, demographic, what their level of fitness or wellness was before they're coming into the program. So we do see like, numbers across the board, but on average, those are the big improvements that we see.
I think it's really difficult for people to sort of get their head around, if I did this could help with, symptoms like POTS and, some of the other kind of quite severe conditions that people are experiencing as a result of having had this virus. But, I know absolutely firsthand from people that have gone off and done the program that it has really helped to transform their experience of pretty much all of their condition on one level or another. So here's someone saying, they struggled with stasis because of brain fog. What are your views on just doing a simple 4-6 breathing practice to start with?
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I saw that in the thing, and that's that breathing protocol is like the bread and butter of all of our programs
Exactly.
anyways.
Yeah.
So I see no problem with doing that. That's definitely a good place to start.
Yeah.
And then, as you progress and you want to start doing different things, you can start to add in variations to that, depending on, what you're looking to get out of the training as well. But yeah, that's a perfect place to start for most people.
Great. And actually, that's probably the one that I teach most often in the yoga and the relaxation live stuff that I teach to my Rest, Prepare, Recover program. And I say, if you can't do 4-6, do 3-5, do 2-4, just a little bit in and a little bit longer out.
Yeah.
And if even that's too taxing, just think about your breathing and don't worry about counting. Like just start somewhere and it will go. It's like getting a muscle in your mind and your body to kind of work together a bit better.
Exactly.
And for those people that have had respiratory issues and challenges to their lungs and their breathing, it is hard and it's not going to come easy. And I know from what I can tell, the Stasis program is quite challenging. You get them to do it for chunks of time. So tell us more about the actual content of the program. Let's say you're new. What's the first thing that you get people to start playing around with?
Yeah, so the first like 7 days after like our onboarding, basically, we've kind of broken down that hour-long onboarding session into 7 smaller chunks. So that's like the first thing that you're going to get introduced to. And that's just like an introduction to breathing, the science of it, how it affects the nervous system, which kind of goes back to your point of like, why is this effective for all these other aspects, POTS, anything like that? The basis of all those like neurological things are a nervous system disorder, right? It's an imbalance of the autonomic nervous system, and that's really at the core of what we're trying to fix with breathing specifically. And it's all about the balance of that like sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And it's the same thing that we wanted to do with like athletes and military people. Most humans nowadays tend to be in this hyper sympathetic state, or this like chronic fight or flight mode. And one of the best modalities to calm that down is simply by being able to like alter your breathing pattern. And so that's kind of like at the core of everything that, and the same with like yoga, right? Like a lot of yoga is based around activating and kind of like waking up that parasympathetic side of the nervous system. Same thing with meditation. At the core of all those like mindfulness practices, what you're really trying to do is like gain a sense of control over how your nervous system is responding to these stimuluses that are constantly coming in throughout the day. Sorry, I went off a tangent there. The program, yeah. So after the onboarding, the phase one of the program is set out. So you typically do 2 breathing sessions per day. We like to have people do it 10 minutes first time in the morning as soon as they wake up, and 10 minutes right before they go to bed at night. And this was like made clear in the onboarding sessions that I used to do, but obviously I understand that people have different time commitments and things that are going on in life outside of this. So, they're free to kind of move those times of when they're doing the training around. In an ideal world, that's when we would like you to do them. So you're typically looking at around 20 to 30 minutes of training per day, broken into 2 chunks. And that's for the first 4 weeks of that phase 1 program. So not a huge time commitment, very doable for most people, depending on kind of what their lifestyle and schedule is.
I think for most people, if they're ill, their lifestyle and schedule is pretty much dominated by the fact that they're at home trying to figure out how to get better. So
Right.
Yeah, I know most people that are, well enough to go and have a life probably aren't thinking about doing the Stasis program anymore. So this is definitely, for people who are at home trying to find a way of helping themselves. And then it goes on, you have 3 levels, is that right?
Correct.
It's like, yeah, okay. So tell me, so let's say someone graduates from level 1 to level 2. What difference do they see?
Yeah. The biggest difference between that phase 1 and phase 2 program is the introduction to some like static apnea breathing protocols, basically getting someone to be comfortable with holding their breath for short durations of time. And that's going to have the biggest impact on CO2 tolerance, which is something we talk quite a bit about. So everyone that's like gone through the onboarding program will know what that means. And it was actually one of the huge pieces of data that we saw from Mount Sinai that was consistent across the board for long haulers was low CO2 in their system. And that has a really big impact on like respiratory health, and then also people's stress response. So that was something we thought was pretty important to add in. And also in duration. So that phase 2 program is 12 weeks long, kind of broken into 2 blocks of training, how we do it. So the first 6 weeks is almost like just a continuation of phase 1. And then it starts to get a little bit harder. And by harder, just the breath protocols get longer. And then that whole second weeks is all apnea-based breathing routines. So that's the biggest difference between those 2. And then if you move on to phase 3, just a continuation of that, actually introduce some unilateral breathing, which a lot of people will find I guess difficult, and more difficult in nature, relative for the person, obviously. And then just continuation of some more apnea routines in that phase 3 program. And then also like adding in movement with the breath. So we thought that was important because a lot of people were having like restriction around their rib cage and lungs and diaphragm. So hopefully they're doing your yoga and stuff too, which would be obviously super beneficial for that. but we just wanted to add in some really light movement. And then we saw that kind of just as another progression to like getting people back to normal. Like instead of just sitting there and breathing, let's start to add some movement with your breath as well. Yeah.
I think it's really important because it's about getting someone to come back home to their body, and the body has gone through a trauma. You know, the virus, whether or not you were hospitalized and put in a coma or put on a CPAP, you know, there's a trauma that happens both physically and mentally with this virus. And it, you know, it's doing stuff inside us that's probably never happened to most people before. And you become alienated from yourself. You know, a lot of people don't recognize their bodies. They don't recognize who they've become. And actually to combine breath work with movement, I think is really important, as long as it's super gentle. And, you know, you've got a kind of absolute kind of level zero from kind of start scratch point. Because people have become so afraid. If I do this, it's going to cause more symptoms. If I move my arms, I might get post-exertional malaise and I might be able to get out of bed for 3 days, you know, and become terrified. So actually just super gentle kind of, I call it just befriending of yourself again. I think it has to happen both physically, you know, with movement and with the breath, because both of those two things are kind of working together to calm. We don't move slowly and softly when we're stressed. So actually we're doing the opposite of that. We're moving how we would move if we were really relaxed. And actually that, you know, those two things are really powerful together. So I love that you added in movement into that section as well. I know one of the guys in my group called Kev got in touch with you, I think, because he did some music to help people count it, because people were like, oh my God, I'm really struggling with the counting. And he'd said, because I run like a post-class support group for the people that show up live. And a lot of people were saying that they were struggling with stasis because they were finding it difficult to count. And, you know, so he had gone off and, you know, he's doing the program himself. He'd gone off and composed all these pieces of music, which I was so inspired by.
Yeah, those were awesome. I remember when he sent me that stuff and I was like, wow, this is like a really, really good, amazing work. So I think when he sent me that stuff, we blasted it out to our whole email list and, you know, say, here's another member who created this for you. So I don't know how many people are using it, but I hope everyone, it's awesome.
I love it. He's still coming to class. That, you know, I know he's a lot better than he was. And I think it's been a life changer for him. But also I think giving himself a purpose was really important, you know, because I think so many people lose their identity with a long-term illness that actually, you know, it was like, there's a bit of me that still exists. You know, I'm a musician. I can write something here. I think it was a real gift, especially because I know he said, and they responded, you know, they came back to me and said, I think it was really
something that I think is super important to mention too. And I would assume that you would agree with me on this, is like, I hope that people realize that, you know, we obviously want people to make a full recovery, but once they're at that stage, I hope that they decide to continue to do this practice throughout their life. And it's really, you can think of it just as any other like training modality, like yoga, meditation, or even like strength training, like workouts. Like it's almost like, I feel like a lot of people think like, okay, I'm better now. I can just stop whatever I was doing. But like, imagine from like an athlete's perspective, you like go run a marathon, you accomplish this big goal. You don't just stop running after that. Like you continue to like hone in on your practice. And it's same with what we want to do here. Like people should be continuing to hopefully utilize this to bring wellness into their life for hopefully the rest of their life, and not just see it as like a means to an end.
I think that's a really great point. And it's one that I often talk about in class. It's like, you know, just because you get to a point where you might be kind of either nearly recovered or recovered doesn't mean that you should stop all of the self-care that you've learned how to do over the past X amount of months. Don't put all of that back in the bin and then treat looking after yourself as the kind of, oh, well, I'll take a glass of wine just to unwind, or, you know, I'll just go and eat a pizza. It's like, why not keep all of the really great practices that you've had to put into place to get your body back to this point of health? You know, you've had to look at your diet, you've had to look at your breathing, you've had to look at your movement, your stress, you know, your gut health, your brain health. You know, one of the first things I tell people to do is get into some kind of counseling. This is tough. You know, don't let your identity loss and the loss of your job and the relationship challenges that this throws your way just sit with you. process it, because it's going to help with all of the work we're trying to do to get that autonomic nervous system back into that calmer state. You can't just do it on your own. It takes a team, I think, to help people navigate this.
Sure.
And you should keep up the work. We've all
Yeah,
learned
why not feel
so
like
much.
this all the
Right.
time, like for the rest of your, and
Right.
the nervous system is so, it's so fluid and adaptable that, like, if you stop doing this stuff, it is easily going to go back to the state of stress and fight or flight. So it is really something that you have to like continue to do, as long as you want to feel the same way that you're feeling.
Right. Well, the world, as far as I can tell from my perspective on little old UK, it's like, it's not getting easier out there.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Not
it
looking
doesn't.
good.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that actually everyone has these tools and they understand them, and that people that have learned them now are passing these tools on to the friends that didn't get affected, but going, actually, do you know what, guys, we could all really benefit from doing more of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of reminding people, don't stop just because you feel better. You have to maintain well-being.
Yeah.
You don't bank it. I always think that. I've practiced yoga for like 30 years. You don't bank it.
Right.
I can't just keep it in the store. Well, that's done. I've done 30 years. That'll be me flexible till I'm 80. No, because by Tuesday of next week, I'm going to have stiffened up again.
No, exactly. It's the same thing with like, I do like a lot of, I'm a big runner now, and it's, I've run 1,000 miles in the past year, but if I stop for a week, like, and I start back up, like, I'm almost at square root one again. It doesn't stay with you. Your body needs to constantly adapt on a day-to-day basis. And that's just how our body was designed to be, functional.
Right. Absolutely. We'll look after other things sometimes more easily than we'll look after ourselves. And actually, it's ourselves that we need to prioritize. And I think that's been a real challenge for a lot of people that have been ill. They're so good at taking care of their work or their children or their family obligations and putting everything else first, and then actually just hoping that their body keeps up with them.
Right.
That actually, I think it's been a paradigm shift for a lot of people to think about their well-being in this way for the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick up on a question here. Okay, so someone that had some trouble with it, and I think this must happen for a lot of people. When I think and concentrate on my breathing, I start to get panicky and hungry for air. I've tried to start so many times. Are there any tips for someone who finds concentrating on breath work stressful?
Yeah, definitely super common for a lot of people when they're getting started. And I think what it is like you said, it's people kind of becoming aware of that body mind space for the first time, and that's anxiety ridden for a lot of people, especially when you look at like a respiratory disease like COVID. I think is when your body's healing from that, it's trying to protect itself. That's why so many people are getting so tight around their diaphragm and their lungs, because you're kind of like hunching over, your body gets in that, tries to get in that safe space. So I don't think it's anything to be like worried, or definitely, it's great that people are aware of it. And I think my advice would be to just start super slow. And if you get to that space where it is really uncomfortable, especially that specific word that you used, was it like hungry for air?
Hungry for air.
Yeah. So we actually tell people when they're doing like a short 10-minute breathing exercise, that's actually a good sign to me, because that means you're really, one of the pillars that we have is like lowering breathing volume. A lot of people breathe in excess air than they actually need. And to build up that CO2 tolerance, you actually want to lower your breathing volume. So just breathe less.
Breathe less, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you do that, you build up that hunger for air. And so I tell people that's a good sign. And as soon as you feel that, stop, kind of pause where you are in the routine, take a couple big, deep, relaxing breaths, let your kind of system reset, and you're going to exhale a lot of that CO2 that's built up in your respiratory system. And then once you feel fine again, just kind of pick up where you left off. And it's perfectly normal for that to happen 2, 3, 4 times within a short 10-minute breathing session for someone that's getting started. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually, again, in my eyes, a good thing that you're feeling and you're aware of that sensation. Let it go, come back to kind of equilibrium, restart, and be okay with that happening for the first couple weeks. And then the more consistent you are, the less and less that'll happen, because you're going to build up that CO2 tolerance slowly and slowly over time.
Yeah.
And then specifically with like the actual protocol, again, 4-6, if that's too difficult, maybe it's only a 2 or 3 second inhale and a 3 or 4 second exhale, and listen to your body. When you get into this after a couple minutes, you'll notice that your body will naturally get into a rhythm. And don't worry so much about the specific counting or seconds, just let your body kind of naturally get into that space that it wants to be. And follow your body and follow your breath and let it just naturally happen.
Yeah, great. I think one of the things that, occurred to me was, as we were just talking about that, there will be people for whom that feeling of hungry for air will trigger a trauma response in them from their experience of having had this virus. And actually, I think it is about noticing it's not happening for real now. This is my body's memory of something very upsetting. And so being kind to yourself and saying, just stop, just take a moment to reset. I'm breathing, I'm okay. And as you say, just do less. If the call is to do 4-6, then do less, take it to a point where it doesn't get that sense of panic happening. And start from there, because, of course, there'll be a lot of people that are coming to it and going, oh my God, I remember that, whether or not they're kind of cognitively aware of that's what's happening, the body will go short of breath. Oh my God, quick, breathe, panic, tension.
Yeah.
And then you're back in that place again, which you don't want to be in.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing, I think, for people to realize too, is that there's a big difference between that happening to you and then you intentionally putting your body into that space. So
two different things.
Yeah, exactly. You're in control of that situation, and it's important to, your body probably will have that like panic, fight or flight reaction because it's so used to that happening to it. But now you're intentionally putting it into there. So as hard as it is, like, it's very important to recognize that and to know that the reaction you want to have is to be calm and be in that space and not have that real panic reaction. So the best way, unfortunately, to train your nervous system to do that is by intentionally doing it over and over and over again. That's all about, right? That's the basis of adaptation. That's the base of how our body changes. Whether you look at stress through working out in the gym, right? You're intentionally tearing your muscles apart so they can build back stronger. You're doing the same thing here. Just kind of two different ways of thinking about it.
I really like that idea of sort of encouraging someone just to practice going into that tension, that stress, and coming out again and going, okay, I have some control here. I can switch it on, but I can also switch it off. And I think that's a really powerful moment for a lot of people when they begin to realize I have some control, I have some autonomy over what's happening in my body. And that's one of the things that we try to promote in my Facebook group and in the live program that we run. It's like, you can bring your heart rate into a place where it's a little bit more grounded and settled and not so scary. You can get your blood pressure down. You can, by working with your breath and doing really gentle movement, it's possible to retrain that.
Exactly. It's actually something really cool that we do. I wouldn't recommend, maybe anyone from the long COVID community to do this, but it's something I do with a lot of the military operators we work with, is we'll actually intentionally put their nervous system in that fight or flight zone through like rapid hyperventilation breathing, like Wim Hof style breathing.
I was just gonna say Wim Hof.
Yeah, so we'll get their heart rate super jacked up. They'll be like sweating in that really hyper fight or flight mode, and then like almost immediately we'll bring it back down through slow breathing, and we'll just do that over and over again. So we'll bring it up, bring it back
Wow.
down, just to show them, okay, here's what these two different spaces feel like from a
Right. Don't be
physiological and a
afraid.
psychological.
Yeah.
And then also to show them, like, you have control whether what state you want to be in. Like, look how fast you can go from your heart rate at like 160, 170 and bring it back down to 100 within a minute or two.
Yeah.
And it's super cool to kind of see that light bulb like switch off in their
Yeah.
head, where now when they're in a real world situation, instead of letting their body have that fight or flight response, they can intentionally control their breath so they don't go to that space.
Right.
So, you know, super, super cool to see that happen in real time for someone.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I think probably for anyone watching this in my long COVID community, just go easy on the go easy on the intense Wim Hof stuff. But, you know, all of the stuff that you're talking about, Wim Hof has been talking about for a long time. And, you know, he's always been an advocate of, you know, controlling mind and body using the breath and these kind of ancient breathing traditions. He didn't invent this, you know, this has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And actually, if you're interested in knowing more about this, obviously not you, but the group, James Nestor's book, Breathe, is a really easy read to help you understand all of this. And why is it that, you know, carbon dioxide is as important as oxygen, you know, because we get so focused on we need more oxygen. Actually, maybe you've got too much oxygen. It's like, what? How is that possible? People go to oxygen bars and they have pure oxygen. Actually, that might not be so good for you. But there's a great book that's very easy to read, and I'm sure you can get it on Audible as well. Okay. Do you know why some of us get out of breath when our O2 isn't that low?
Yeah, so that goes back to what you were just saying about the carbon dioxide. This is super common. We got this all the time. It's something I honed in a lot on those onboarding sessions, because it's very confusing for people when they're told to monitor their SpO2 levels and they're wearing a pulse oximeter, and it's you know, maybe 96, 97, 98, 99 SpO2 saturation at all times, but people are still experiencing that shortness of breath or that hunger for air. And it's likely if they went and got their CO2 levels test, their end tidal CO2 levels, they would find that they're much lower than the normal rate. And so that's basically how that's happened. Like in the body, hemoglobin is kind of like a transport vessel for oxygen. In order for oxygen molecules to be released, carbon dioxide, CO2, has to be present in the system. The more CO2 that you have, the easier that release happens, the more O2 your body actually absorbs. So from a physiological standpoint, that's likely what's happening to those people that have normal SpO2 readings, but are still experiencing a shortness or air hunger.
And so for them, the way out of this is actually to retrain their breathing so that they are breathing less.
It's actually like counterintuitive to what they probably think they should be doing, because when you feel that, your natural response is to breathe more, right? But yeah, you'd actually intentionally want to, again, like lower your breathing volume or start to do some of those apnea specific protocols where you're holding your breath for a short amount of time and just repeating that over and over again. And again, what's that is going to do is just naturally raise your CO2 levels in your system. And so when people hold their breath, as soon as you start to hold your breath, that sensation to want to breathe is actually a buildup of CO2. It's not a lack of oxygen.
Right. So yeah.
For most people, you have to hold your breath for maybe a minute or even longer, depending on, again, like what your fitness level is, for your oxygen levels to actually drop, pretty low, like somewhere around 85%, even lower than that. So that's a long time, but
a really long time.
In order to get to that, you're experiencing some really discomfort. And what that is, again, is just a buildup of CO2 in your system. And so the more you practice holding your breath, the more comfortable you get with those sensations. Again, your body just adapts to being able to deal with higher levels of CO2. And that's why you see, these people from the free diving community or surfers, they're able to hold their breath for so long. It's not that they do anything special with oxygen per se. It's just they built up a higher level of CO2 tolerance.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's just made me realize now why when I hold my breath when I'm watching a surfing show, and I hold my breath and I'm like, how can they breathe now? Because I now need to breathe and they're still under the water and they're trying to. So
Yeah.
yes, it's great
It's
that
it's actually something like, again, don't go out there and do this unless you have
it
like
takes a bit of practice.
supervisor. Definitely want to, but people can YouTube this and kind of see how
Yeah,
this actually works, where
yeah.
like when you do Wim Hof style, any sort of hyperventilation breathing, what you're doing is you're getting all of the CO2 out of your system and making room for more oxygen. And so you could literally, someone can time their breath hold right now, like just at rest. And let's say I can hold my breath for a minute. If I do like a minute of hyperventilation and I get all of that CO2 out of my system, I can hold my breath for twice as long, if not
Wow.
even more. And
Yeah.
anyone can do this. It's just like it's just physiology, right? Like you're just getting all of that CO2 out of your
Training.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a David Blaine, the magician,
Right.
he just did this big thing where he kind of like took Wim Hof's stuff, but again, Wim Hof didn't come up with this either. He just made a big brand for himself. But he was just taking people off the streets and they would test their breath hold time. And like within 30 minutes of him working with them, he was getting these people to hold their breath for 4 or 5 minutes. So it's really like
Wow.
simple to
Yeah.
do. It's not like magic. It's just like you're training your body really fast to be able to off gas all that CO2. And when you don't have CO2 in your system, you can hold your breath for pretty long.
Amazing. Amazing. I think it is important for us to just, if you're watching this, obviously we're not expecting you to be going free diving and
Yeah.
surfing just yet, but okay, just keep that as an open mind, because if you learn these techniques now, because it's part of your recovery, who knows what you could do with it, So it's like, don't limit your life towards just, oh, I just need to get better. No, open your mind. What else could you do with it? I think I don't think Wim Hof's perhaps ever been talked about as much before. More and more people are going, oh, breathing, oh, stasis, oh, Wim Hof, oh, and
Mhm.
kind of, is it all the same sort of thing? It's like, yes, it is all the same sort of thing. It's just
It's
what
just
you want to do with it.
exactly. Yeah. I think that's the most important thing, is like just to show people that there's so many different aspects that
Right,
breathing can apply to. It's not just for health. It's not just
right.
for athletics. It's like,
Endurance.
yeah, it's whatever. I mean, it's literally something that all humans do, right? From the day they're
Right,
born to the day
right.
they die. And you can apply it to so many different things. Like I work with like some executives and like CEOs right now and entrepreneurs, and I'm teaching them like how to perform better when they're given presentations in front of people.
Perfect.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean? So it's just like there's so many aspects. It has to do with everything we do in life.
yeah.
So that's the important takeaway, I think, there.
Totally. And I think for me, with someone who's worked with breath and yoga, it's like the breathing reflects the state of mind, and the state of mind is reflected in the breathing, and they can influence, each other.
100%. Yeah.
And that for a lot of people is like, wow, really?
Yeah. It's that true mind body connection. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Um, so oh, I've got a really nice one. So we're going to come towards the end now, because you've been doing an amazing job and giving me your time on a very nice, what I can see is a sunny morning there in Miami. Can you just make sure he knows how many people he's helped on here, as in our Facebook group? And I'm sure, there's thousands of others, presumably way further afield. I'm not sure how aware he is on the impact of his program, and that it's made on people, and that they had nothing else to work with at maybe the scariest times in their lives. And people are just really clear. They want to make sure that you've heard that perhaps again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, so much. It means a lot to me.
Oh, and so here's a question from me, like, what's next for you with this program?
Yeah. So we're trying to develop a mobile application for people. We want to make the user experience as best as possible, and we want to be able to start to really individualize the experience more. So what we have now is, people that have used it know it's very templated. We've
Right.
developed a framework, and
Yeah.
then people have to kind of guess, well, is this right for me? Should I tailor it? Like is 4-6 okay? It's too hard. Okay, well, what do I do? Is it 2, 3, 4? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to fix that. And how I think we're going to be able to do that is by incorporating biometrics and like wearable devices into what we're doing. And that's really exciting to me. I think that's the future of where we want to take this. And then it's also expanding outside of just like healthcare, to work with something we're really interested in doing is like getting into like the enterprise space for like, work life. Right now, especially with remote work life, like people, even healthy people are at all-time high stress levels and fatigue. And so how do we help them? How do we start to, work with more athletes and military personnel? That's something I'm personally super passionate about. And we've just had difficulty kind of breaking into these other sectors, really just with how the product that we have, it's obviously not super user friendly right now. And we understand that. So we're working towards that. Yeah, we're working towards that. The biggest issue for us has been like having like funding, right? To be able to develop all this stuff. It's really expensive to make mobile applications. So that's something that we're trying to figure out. How do we do that right now? We have a pretty exciting project that's going to be launching in the beginning of 2022 with UPenn's med school. It's going to be a clinical study for heart failure patients that I'm really excited about. And the lead researcher there saw the Atlantic article and reached out to us. And he's done a lot of clinical studies in the past with these heart failure patients. And basically they've used a lot of mechanical and electrical stimulation devices that have to be surgically implanted into these patients in order to activate the vagus nerve. And
I'm reading about that.
Saw our article in the Atlantic, and we've been giving him a lot of the research and data, and he thinks that through proper breath training that we can impact the vagus nerve just as well, if not better, than those electrical and mechanical stimulation devices. And that's a big deal for these patients because most of them are over 65, and having any sort of surgical procedure is really high risk. And the outcomes with these devices haven't been really well. So that's something I'm super excited about. That'll be a really big deal. The US alone spends like $25 billion on heart failure every year. It's the biggest medical expense, I think, for the country. So if we can teach people how to properly breathe and them to kind of like, be able to control that through breath work, it would be super powerful.
But Josh, how are the drug companies going to make money if everyone can fix themselves with breath?
Yeah, that's the problem with all this, right? Is that's a big issue. And it's been something that has come up quite a bit recently. People are like, oh, what are big pharma companies going to do? So I don't know. We'll see. They haven't come after us yet. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'll bite that sword when it comes, I guess.
I can hide you over here in Brighton in the UK. And let me just finish by saying one of the things that I really love is that you've brought the concept of breath work to a group of people that would possibly, many of them never even consider it. And even those that might not have or might have considered it might not have wanted to go down the yoga route, because essentially the techniques are very similar. The way that, we work with the breath and the body in yoga is very similar to the way that you're doing it now. But a lot of people might have gone, oh, I don't want to do yoga because of whatever, preconception they might have around it. But you've just gone, okay, there's this amazing tool. We're just going to call it Stasis. Here it is. It's a program. Let's follow it. And you've made it so accessible and so empowering for people to feel like, okay, great. I know the science behind it. I know, that it's helping other people. I'm just going to start. And that has been a really great thing to see. So, for me, whenever I see something that I believe in just being taken into the mainstream and just packaged in a way that allows people that perhaps would have doubted before, okay, I'll try that because it doesn't have anything attached to it that I might have a judgment around. It's brilliant. So, well done. I'm super, super impressed that you've kind of taken this and just, it was like the perfect timing for you to go, let's create a product.
Yeah.
Oh God, there's a pandemic. Quick, let's get it out there.
Yeah, it was, unfortunately, like great timing on that aspect, but it's been really exciting, and I'm just like so grateful for how many people I know we've been able to impact. I think just from our numbers, we've had like over 10,000 people sign up to use the programs, and then I know like the programs are being kind of disseminated through groups and stuff, which that way, so it's probably much higher than that.
Yes.
From all different continents or across the world now. So that's obviously super cool to build something and see it be used all across the world. Is something I had no intention of doing. So it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got nearly 5,000 people in our Facebook group, and I know lots of them have kind of been moved towards taking it on as a part of their recovery, and the feedback has always been amazing. So, and I love to hear that you're simplifying it, because I know a lot of people go, oh, it's too much, and I have templates and the downloads, and so I know that there's someone in my group that actually kind of just manages that for some of the people that just get really overwhelmed by it. Just fine, I'll send it to you, I'll make it nice and easy. So we've almost created our own workaround. So I love to hear though that you're working on that as well. And I'm sure if you set up a little GoFundMe page, I'm sure there's a bunch of people who would chip in a little bit of money just to help, because it's helped so many people. Don't be afraid to ask. But Josh, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah,
I really value hearing about it. I've known about the program for a really long time now, since it started being talked about and being kind of pushed out there. And I love that it's been free to access. That one has been an unbelievable gift to so many people. So a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know all of the people that I kind of have in my group that are looking to you and also saying the same thing. So
awesome.
Appreciate
it very much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. Keep in touch. Let us know what developments come your way, and let us know about the app if you get anywhere with that, because I'm sure people will take it on. I love the idea of maintenance for the rest of your life. Don't just give up on it now that you feel better, kind of thing. I think you're absolutely right. So
yeah, awesome.
We look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
have a great
Josh.
rest of your weekend. Yeah.
And you. Bye.